Welcome to today's podcast. This is really a unique podcast. It's my first one in English, and I reached a special milestone set by myself. I learned launching a podcast successfully, you should minimum release 10 podcasts. When the flow is starting. As I started my preparation 1 year ago, I had a list of nearly 50 interesting guests. With every podcast, this list is growing. Learning from my guest's book, You Should Have Dreams, and starting with small steps towards your dreams. And I've created a dream list. Reaching a solid level of production now, I started with one of the most challenging one, in my understanding. My assumption, no chance. And still I tried it. And now we have him here. Today I'm celebrating my 20th podcast, which requires a really interesting and special guest. Welcome, John Strelecky. Great having you here.
Thank you so much. And congratulations on the success of your podcast. That's awesome.
Thank you. How should we start? I am curious about questions because your books are so easy to read. Although there is so much content inside, you have to do it several times to not forget something and miss something. Do you have started as baby, getting born with a notepad and a pen, like I'm from the sport, nearly got on the sport place, born or starting my career? Is that something you had already as a gift as baby with you?
No, it's very interesting in that I did not. I had no particular dreams of becoming an author. It wasn't even something that I envisioned as part of my story. And yet here we are. And so I think one of the big takeaways from that for me, and I try and share with audiences, is that much like you did with your podcast, it sometimes is something that comes to you and you don't have experience in it. You don't have knowledge necessarily, but you begin, and that's how you gain the experience, and that's how you gain the knowledge. And then you enter a rhythm. And so I would say that it's very easy for me to write now. When I sit down and I have a project that I'm working on, it flows effortlessly. That's part of that rhythm that you get into. And so for someone who's starting something new, like, don't worry if you don't have it all figured out at the start. It's okay. One of my favorite quotes that I came up with, it was an aha moment that came to me. And it was that every genius starts off knowing nothing about what they became a genius in. Every expert starts off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in. And so it's okay that you start at ground zero, but as long as you start and you keep taking steps and you keep learning new things, good things will happen. And that has certainly been the case with my writing. It's been a great joy. Now I get to travel the world and interact with fans and audience members. And I love the positive impact that the books have had on people's lives. So it's been a real treat.
Yeah, and I confirm they really have. So as well, our own crisis for books help us with, it's nice to read and still you end up with such a positive manner getting out. And this helps you in the dark days. And as well, if you're looking on my recommendation list of all my training material, there are several John Strelecky books on it. I cannot hold it on.
Thank you. That's the highest compliment possible for an author, when someone reads a book that you wrote and enjoys it enough that they recommend it to people they care about. That's the ultimate. I do have a question for you as it relates to that. This is always one of the fun things for me. How did you first hear about any of my books?
It's a long time ago. I have to think about it. As I started about 15 years ago looking on mindfulness, so you learned a lot with John Kabat-Zinn, and there are some German people from churches who are very wisdom and having trainings and books. And somehow your name came across with the Café book. And then Big Five had been famous. So I think I first read the Big Five book and used the video as well in some trainings. And then remembered back where our cafes. And now we have all of them. And as well, you mentioned the AHA book. So we created our own AHA books and still reworking through all your books because there are so many AHA moments there as quotes you have to write down. Maybe you have one book with, I don't remember the English title, with the bluebirds. If you like to find oranges, don't look in the bluebirds or vice versa.
Yeah.
There are a lot of quotes in, but it's not the same. It's great to open it and you find directly the one you need for the day, which is absolutely great. But it's not the same if you don't write it your own.
Yeah, well, I love everything about that story that you just shared. One of the great inspiring things that has come about being an author is the way that books have an energy all their own. And so many times people will say to me, I was walking through a bookstore and your book just fell off the shelf in front of me, or I was looking at a table of books and something just drew me to it, and I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. And I love that, because what it tells us is that sometimes you find the book and sometimes the book finds you. And I certainly have had that in my own life as well, where I've just been drawn to a book and I couldn't even explain why, but there was something really powerful in it for me. And I think one of the other great takeaways for us is to learn to trust those instinctive moments, that when you feel called to something, there's probably a good reason why you're being called in that direction.
But talking about your influence, I don't know if you have heard about Boom, and there's a movie in Germany. So it's a company changed from investor driven. It's a hotel chain, or they manage hotels, and it was investor driven. And the CEO 10 years ago had a crisis, changed completely, analyzing, reading your books, reading other books like positive psychology. And now they are completely driven like Peter Delaire and his company. So appreciating the people, making the jobs around the capabilities of the people. And they are not anymore driven by results and increased revenues. In that time, happy people double the revenue every year.
Yeah. So in the Big Five for Life book, I talk about that. And I'm sorry, what was the name of that's fascinating story. What's the name of the hotel chain?
Boom. I can send you the link. And maybe that's something, because in the second book you have visited a company in Canada. Maybe it's time to visit this company. Especially, I had been there last week, and they have a new hotel, a mindfulness hotel. It's a little bit inspired from the Café at the end of the world. They call it the hotel at the end of the world. It's directly on the seaside to the North Sea.
Okay. Oh, I would love to learn more about them and to say thank you to them. So that is awesome. Yeah. If you could send me the link, that'd be great. I think that the book you were referencing, the Big Five for Life book. And that's really one of the essences in there is, so if we are in the world of leadership and part of our goal is obviously to be successful as an organization, and the metrics we can evaluate success on can vary from happy customers, happy employees. And at the end of the day, one of the metrics is the revenues. And the question always is, so what is the way to be more successful revenue wise? Because it's critical. If you aren't successful revenue wise, then you have no company. You can't pay your employees. You can't provide your products and services. But what you're referencing is so true, that at the end of the day, what matters is if you treat your customers well, if you treat your employees well, the revenues follow. And it's such a simple concept. And for those of us who have ever worked in an organization where we were treated poorly, you know how bad it feels to be on the other side of that experience and how demoralizing it is. And to the flip side, when you work in a great organization that really cares for their people and everybody in the organization believes in the purpose of the organization, it's astounding and wonderful the ways in which great things come from that.
Absolutely. And you see it in their eyes from the people as well.
Yeah.
So it is so easy and so nice to interact with. You like to come back. And that is their success story as well.
And that's, in this day and age, when there's so much of a social media presence, we're bombarded by data points of information, whether it's advertising or just imagery. And so at the end of the day, what matters most now is a personal recommendation from someone. That carries such an incredible amount of weight. And so, yeah, when you do right by your people, when you do right by your customers, those customers are going to go tell other people, wow, this was an amazing experience. You should go stay at this hotel, or this was an amazing restaurant. You should go eat there. And that really is the most spectacular piece of marketing you could have in today's day and age, is when people are willing to personally tell each other, not just online, but really actually say the words, this is a place you should go visit.
Yes. If you're looking a little bit back, before you sold 1 million books only from Café in 42 languages, which is really unbelievable, what success. But if you're looking back, I think you started writing with about 30, and it took you only 21 days writing the Café book. And it was your first book.
Yeah. So right. The first book is the Café on the Edge of the World. And I wrote that book, as you said, in 21 days. And we were talking earlier about intuition. It was very much of an intuitive thing. I had just come back from a year of backpacking around the world on 40 euros a day, which was a life-changing experience in so many positive ways. And something inside of me said, sit down and write. And I followed that intuitive guidance, and I sat down and just started typing. And over the course of 21 days, the Café on the Edge of the World came out of me. And yeah, here it is now. It's in 42 languages. It's been 5-time bestseller of the year in your home country. And so it's a good example to me of the power of trusting your intuition. Sometimes we can't quite understand why we're being called to something, but there's probably a good reason. And in this case, there was a really good reason, because when I stand in in front of fans and I hear the amazing stories about their experiences with the books, it validates everything that I do as an author, and it validates my whole purpose for existing. I live on this planet to try and make a positive difference in the lives of others and to create museum day moments for people. Yeah. And so when I have the chance to stand in front of someone and they tell me this amazing life story about the way in which they view the world differently because they've read something in one of the books, it just 100% validates all the efforts that go into writing.
So I still have a chance. I co-author 2 books, but still it was not as intuitive as you wrote your book. So maybe it was not the perfect match of topic and don't had a life trip before.
Yeah, well, it's as we were talking very early in the call, it's a process. Life is a process. And so some people start writing when they're younger. I didn't write that book. I wrote my very first book. I was 33. For a lot of people, that's quite old to be thinking about a writing career. And, so it's never too late. You start and you get better. I think I'm a better writer now than I was back then. I know 100% that I'm a better writer now. But if I hadn't started, then I wouldn't have progressed. So, you got to start somewhere.
There had been a dream for your life before you started being an author. You started in Chicago, going to school, and when you had a dream. Would you like to share a little bit about what was your original dream and what happened that you changed to getting an author?
Yeah, the original dream was to be a pilot, actually, a professional pilot. And that was my dream because I really wanted to go travel and see the world. And I wanted to have flexibility in my life and freedom. And it's an interesting example of how your limited life scope and the limited lens by which you view the world can so strongly influence your decisions. That was the only career I knew of other than teaching where you had a lot of time off. Because if you're a pilot, you fly 3 days on or 4 days on, and then you have 3 days off. And if you schedule it right, it's like 3 days on, 4 days off, 4 days off, 3 days on. And so you could actually have an entire week off in between your flying schedule. And I knew that pilots got airline tickets for free. And so I thought, well, that's a great way to travel the world. I'll get free airline tickets, right? And so that was the basis in large part for my decision to become a pilot. Now, that's a horrible way to try and pick a career. I didn't become a pilot because I was passionate about flying. And maybe that's the reason it didn't work out at the end, because that's kind of life guiding you in the right direction. But yeah, I went through all the steps to become a pilot and then found out I had a heart condition that nobody had ever diagnosed. And so after years and years of effort and investing all of my finances, that dream was taken away from me. At the time, it was catastrophic. It was just crushing. But now I realize, looking backwards, it was the best thing that ever could have happened, because had I become a pilot, I wouldn't have become an author. And then, I love the life that I have now. I love the chance to interact with fans and to write stuff that makes a difference in the world. So again, sometimes life throws you in a different direction than you expect. If we're capable of accepting that moment and looking at it and asking the question, why, it can lead to some amazing stuff. And I won't say that I'm perfect about that. Like I said, when my dream was taken away from me, the year after that was horrible. I just was depressed and I couldn't figure out why it had happened to me. It seemed very, very unfair. But again, in retrospect now, it was one of the best things that ever could have happened.
But unfortunately, my experience as well, sometimes the crisis is the best teacher, and changing your style of living for the future and what you're doing.
Yeah. And, I think that we get little taps on the shoulders about that. And those, if we can allow ourselves to get to the point where we listen to the tap on the shoulder, that's a lot less painful than what ends up happening is if we don't listen to the tap on the shoulder, eventually it becomes something more drastic. And, for whatever reason, I just wasn't quite ready in life to listen to the tap on the shoulder. It had to be something more drastic to get my attention. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we allow ourselves to tune into our intuition and to be aligned with our purpose, to be aligned with our personal big five for life, then I think we're much more in tune to those taps on the shoulder.
In the taps are painful as well. So you don't like to listen to them.
And then you learn to trust it. It's a process. And my goal, so I'm a parent, I have a child, and one of my goals in being a parent is to try and help her understand to listen to those taps that I didn't have that sort of guidance when I was growing up. I didn't understand that at all. So I had to learn through the painful process, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think you can teach kids to learn to trust their instincts, trust their intuition right from the start.
If I'm reading or looking into a book of Big Five, there is such a lot of moments in teaching moments for the readers. I still every time asking myself, how have you developed these ideas? So many things in one book.
Thank you. It's a lifetime of experience, to be honest with you. I've worked with some astounding leaders, such great people, and I've worked for some horrible leaders. And I saw the way that they treated their people, the way they treated me, as well as everybody else who worked in our office. And we spend about 70% of our awake life Monday through Friday, either at work, getting to work, or thinking about work. And one of the great opportunities is to create a space where you love what you do. You are treated very, very well. You're treated with respect, where you have a passion for the work that you do, so that you get up. I was just having a conversation just a few minutes before we started our podcast, talking about life goals. And one of the life goals is to be excited to get up every day. And, I've been in situations many, many years of my life where I didn't like my jobs. I had horrible bosses. I was not excited to get up in the day. I was excited for the weekend, but I certainly was not excited Monday through Friday. And that's a shame. And if we allow ourselves to demand more of life, demand more of ourselves, where we choose careers which are in alignment with our purpose, where we only choose to work for people and with people who are good people and treat us with dignity and respect, life is a lot better when we make those kind of choices.
And your body tells you it already,
Totally. Yeah. And part of it comes down to self-confidence. It's having the confidence to say, I have skills that the world appreciates, and I am willing to offer those skills to the workforce, and I will contribute enough value in the workforce that the value I contribute is above and beyond my salary. And therefore, I should be able to demand of myself that I work in a place where I'm treated well. And so there's some, I don't think anybody deserves to be treated poorly. But what I wish I'd have realized earlier in my career is that it's partly my responsibility to get out of those situations when they're bad. I think what I was hoping is that the leader would realize you're being a jerk and you shouldn't be a jerk. But you know what? If they had that ability within them, then they wouldn't have been a jerk in the first place. And so my big takeaway is, when you're in those situations, in all likelihood, the leader is not going to change. They're not going to have this wonderful epiphany one day and choose to be a better person. Therefore, the choice is either continue to work in that environment or get out. And that's the confidence that comes from saying, I'm going to get out and I'll find a place where my skills are appreciated and I'm treated better.
But if you're looking inside, it's a rat race, and you're inside in a wheel, and every step is a career step. You think about it. And it's a challenge to realize it, and when stepping out of it. In Germany, we call it Hamsterrad.
Yeah, the hamster wheel. Totally. Yeah. But so I get that. And I've been in the hamster wheel for a lot of years, so I understand exactly what that feels like. Again, the takeaway for me is to more closely align your personal purpose and your personal big five for life with the work that you do. And so if you are a project manager and on the weekends, what you love is hiking and backpacking, then okay, at a minimum, try and get a job doing project management work in a company that manufactures backpacks or that has something to do with hiking. This is such a simple choice of blending our hobbies and our passions with the work that we do Monday through Friday. The sad thing is, it's very rare that someone teaches you this when you're going through your educational process. So most of us end up getting jobs in careers that someone said, well, this is a good industry, and this is a good career field. But we all have that choice to make those changes. Someone is working as a project manager in a company that specializes in backpacks. And if you love hiking and backpacking, it might as well be you. And so that to me is one of the big aha moments in life, is taking the steps to start aligning these things. And it's actually easier than people often think, because when you're sitting down in a job interview in a company that manufactures backpacks and you love backpacking, like, you just have a vibe about you. You've got an energy about you, and they sense that, and they realize, wow, this is like a kindred spirit. This is someone who's going to be excited about our product, excited about our customers. And so it's easier than people think to get jobs in the industries that are tied to their passions.
In the Big Five book, that nice enterprise, Delaire Enterprise. And I think that's one of the most asked questions to you. Where is this company and what is the real name of it, as everybody likes to apply there?
Yeah, you know what? So these companies, I talk about, you're right, I talk about Derail Enterprises. And it was interesting because when I finished the Big Five for Life book, writing it, and then people were reading it, I was getting a lot of great feedback. I ended up writing a sequel to that book, which is called The Big Five for Life Continued. It's called something slightly different in German, but it's the sequel book to The Big Five for Life. And in there, I profile a company called DLGL, which is based out of Montreal, Canada. And when I met the folks at DLGL, so much of their story was very similar to the story I had described in the original Big Five for Life. And over the years, I've met many, many companies and many, many leaders who are very passionate about these same topics, about creating great workplaces and providing a great product for their customers. So the companies are out there. We have to look harder for them, because there's more companies that are not that than are that. But that said, there are great companies out there. And if you're a great employee, if you have a lot to offer, then again, the onus is on us to find those types of companies and choose to work for them and add our value to the world to those types of organizations.
Or start your own one.
Or start your own one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've made that recommendation to many people in the past also. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12 years old, and I love being an entrepreneur. I know that it's not for everybody, and I'm not saying everybody should do it or has to do it. What I am saying, I guess, is that it's an option. So if you feel called to do it, it's a fun lifestyle. It really is.
Looking to the coffee book, number 2 and 3, reading it, a question came in my mind. It's about Mike and Joe, the personas in the book, talk about their kids and their travel adventures. And I thought, this is awesome, but something is missing. The mothers of the kids had been never mentioned. And I thought, is it a purpose to make the story simple, or is that holding something back from your life experience, or because there's another book coming appreciating the moms of the kids?
Right. So I actually wrote a book that only had a mom and a baby character. I don't think it's come out in Germany. It's called The Mommy Butterfly and the Baby Egg. And it's a book that I wrote for my daughter when she was a very little baby. And so there's only a mommy and a baby in that one. I find that in general, I write what I know. And so I can very effectively talk from the perspective of a father and his child. And therefore, it makes it very easy for me to do that and to write in a way that's very authentic. There's a lot of great female authors out there who write about the mother-daughter or mother-son relationship, and they do a great job of that. And so I leave that to them.
Okay. And all the characters, Joe and Sean, I assume that's nearly your experience, mostly.
Yeah. So people ask me that all the time in terms of who am I in the character mix. And certainly the Café books, especially the Café on the Edge of the World story, the character of John is very much me. And usually it is the me about a few years before when I wrote the book. And so in the first Café book, he comes in, he's very confused. By the time that I wrote that book, I had really figured a lot of life out for myself. Through my experience of backpacking around the world, I'd learned a lot about why I'm here on the planet and the rest of that. And then there's other aspects of all the characters, which are part of me as well. And then there's other parts of the characters that are just their own energy. I sometimes will be writing and I'll write something down and I'm like, wow, like where did that come from? That's such a fantastic piece of life wisdom. It definitely didn't come from me. It came from somewhere out there through me onto the pages. So sometimes I just shake my head in awe at the wisdom of Casey, for example, in particular. Casey is just a rock of consciousness, of confidence. And sometimes she says things and I just think, wow, like that is just the most brilliant piece of life wisdom. I need to remember that for myself. So yeah, I try and incorporate aspects of myself in the right places. And like I said, sometimes there's an energy that is way above and beyond me. Safari des Lebens, that book in particular, writing that book was about having a conversation with Ma Ma Gombe. And Ma Ma Gombe is this incredible spirit, energy, presence that is just something entirely of its own. It was a wonderful writing experience to write that book. And I know it's probably one of the lesser known books of mine, but a lot of readers have said that is their favorite book out of all of them.
You traveled a lot with your daughter and long trips around the world. In Germany, that would be not allowed because the kids have to go to school. How have you done that? Because otherwise your daughter is still in the ground school because you traveled a lot.
Right. So there's more flexibility here where I live with things like homeschooling. And so for 3 years, I was her teacher and travel. She would do the assignments, when the time was right, but it was spectacular in that, she'd be studying ancient Greece and we'd be walking in ancient Greece so she could really see and feel what ancient Greece was. She was passionate about a series of books called Percy Jackson, which is just a great series of kids' books. The author's name is Rick Riordan. And so she loved the Greek mythology. And so then I said, let's go see Greece. And so, yeah, we had quite a bit of flexibility in that. And, to her credit, she did a great job of realizing that there was going to be a trade-off there. She didn't get to spend time with her friends in the classroom, but she had the chance to see other things. And she also had to be very independent and self-reliant on getting her work done. And she did a great job of that. What's fascinating to me is that when I told people in Germany that, they said that would never happen in Germany, never be allowed. And now because of COVID has changed the game completely, where the never is now actually happening. And I'm really curious to see. I don't think homeschooling is for every parent, and it's definitely not for every kid either. But I think coming out of COVID, you may see more demand from some parents saying, hey, this worked out really good. We would like to have this flexibility in the future as well. And so I wonder if this will be a catalyst to change things in some cultures to allow parents and students to have greater flexibility in the way that they do education.
A friend of mine told his son he likes to be for his own. In school, he was not so good, but now learning at home alone, he's the number one.
Yeah.
Kid, so he's excited about it, doing all for his own, and is now turning to one of the best ones. It's funny, yeah.
That's really the goal. I share that all the time, both with my own daughter and when I'm interacting with students. I say, the goal of education is to learn to love learning. That's really the whole goal. It was not that way for me. I really did not like school very much when I was a student, a young student especially. It was just about memorization and testing, and I just didn't see the point of it. Now as an adult, I see what the goal should have been is to help students learn to love learning, because life is an unbelievable opportunity to learn. And if you basically crush that out of children so that they can't stand the learning experience, so much is lost. And that's sad. And part of that comes down to giving kids the opportunity to learn about things they're interested in. And so if a kid loves the world of YouTube, for example, and well, great, here's an opportunity to learn what it's like to be a YouTuber. And if they love programming, then they can spend a lot of their time learning about programming. That's a method where you've got an integration of a child's interests and their learning. And when you do that, kids learn at a much more accelerated pace. I remember working with some parents and kids, and the mom said, oh, my son doesn't like to read. And I said, well, what does he like to do? And she said, well, he loves sports. He loves to play football. And I said, well, great. So have him read about football. And it's such a simple comment, right? But then I connected with her about a month later. I said, how's it going? And she said, oh my gosh. She said, he can't stop reading about football. He just never realized that reading could be about something that you actually are interested in. And so that's a great opportunity for us to use. One benefit that may have come from COVID is there may be a better alignment of the way in which we learn and the opportunities to learn in that way.
If you're now looking back on your journey the last, I think, 15 years, writing such great books with all the positive learning possibilities in it, that might have an impact on your life as well. So if I now would ask your wife and your daughter, what would they say, what has changed? And is it a good change about you?
Well, so I would caveat this a tiny bit by saying, and I talk about this in the Big Five for Life book, that life is not just a straight up curve. It's not a straight line, that there are always going to be highs and lows. When you're on what I call an ascending life curve, at some point as you're experiencing the highs and lows, curve itself is climbing. And so while you still have lows, your lows at some point are actually higher than what used to be highs. And so I suppose what they would say is that life still has highs and lows for me, but that my lows are way higher than what used to be my highs. And as a small example of that, it might be a frustrating day for me now might be, hey, we're working on this really cool project where we're going to bring Café items and make them available to people. So maybe it's a coffee mug where it says, why are you here? And so my low is that we're working on this project and it's not going as fast as I want. But that's way better than what used to be my high, which is, I finally get a week off from this job that I can't stand earlier in my life. You know what I'm saying?
So you're easier to consume now.
I would say that it's, I'm easier to see. No, I do my best to be a role model of the things that I talk about. I mean, life is better when we're in alignment with our purpose. And so I have Big Five for Life discussions with my daughter. I have been since she was very, very little. And one of the other things that we do as a family, and this has been a great technique, is to say at the start of every year, we sit down as a family and we talk about what would make the next year the best year ever for us as a family. And we talk about what places do we want to travel, what experiences do we want to have, what things, going back to the learning, what things do we want to learn this year that would be really interesting to learn about. And we map out a plan as a family. And some of the stuff is individual, some of the stuff is collective as a family, but it gives us a great map for the year to talk about what would be the best year ever. Now, certainly COVID has thrown a wrench into a lot of our plans this year, and that's required us to be flexible and adaptive. But that's part of life. Life is not always going to be seamless. And so learning to be flexible is a good lesson in and of itself.
That's right. If you're looking to a future, I think you had just released your book, the new one, which I've learned.
I did. It's called What I've Learned. Yeah.
What I've Learned, yeah. And it's had been coming out in September, and it's already read by myself, and it's awesome. And I see you publishing a lot of marketing currently. You are on every channel. You can see John now talking about this book. I think you are missing, I assume you're missing now the traveling and the release parties of the books everywhere in the world. Knowing you are on Sunday starting being in Germany on air live virtually for such an event, is there anything else where you say, what's coming besides the book? There are already trips or next projects where you're excited of?
Yeah. So thank you very much for mentioning that. Yeah. So I released What I've Learned in September. And I guess one of the saddest parts of the experience of COVID for me is normally I would be in Frankfurt in October for the book fair, and I would be doing a whole tour of Germany for a week before that at events where I have a chance to interact with fans, do speaking events. And so this year, all of that was canceled. We are doing some virtual events. I'm actually doing a TEDx talk, and I'm doing the Greater Conference that you mentioned. And those are wonderful. And I'm glad that technology enables us to do that. But one of the things I look forward to in the upcoming next 12 months, hopefully, is the chance to be traveling again, to come back to Germany, come back to Switzerland, Austria, and to have the chance to interact with fans. One of the projects I'll be working on, I talked about this a little bit last year, but one of the projects I'll be working on is the fourth Café book. The character of Hannah, who we met in the third Café book, the entire fourth Café book is her story, Hannah's story. And so I'm very excited about taking the time to immerse myself back in the cafe, to let that story flow forth and then release that. I don't know whether the book will actually come out in 2021 or whether it will come out in 2022. Part of that depends on the state of the world with COVID, because I want to make sure that when that book is released, I have the chance to interact with fans. And but I will be working on that.
And you have a huge community in the German-speaking countries, I learned, and in the Netherlands. I was surprised to see how big here the community is.
Yeah, and one of the wonderful things about that to me is so often in life what we hear about are the ways in which people are different and the conflicts that people have because they're different. But what the books have taught me and really reinforced, I saw it when I was traveling the world too, when I was backpacking on $40 a day, but I see it absolutely in the books as well, in that we are more similar than different as human beings. And so that first Café book is in 42 languages. That means that people across radically different cultures, very, very different life experiences, very, very different ways in which they live, they're still connected around these three questions, right? Why are you here? Do you fear death? Are you fulfilled? Those three questions from the Café on the edge of the world. And I love that because that tells me that there is a place in our societies where we can connect around the bigger questions, regardless of the differences that we have, that there is so much more about us that is similar. And maybe, just maybe, those questions will provide a focal point for the community of the world to connect around and sort of embrace each other, and we can build from there.
I'm already curious in which place this time the Café will be, and I assume you will not say it now. I have found a nice quote from Bob Marley fitting to what you are saying in your books as well. Maybe you know that quote. No, love a life you live and live a life you love.
Absolutely. A great quote. I saw it on your website. Yeah, I love that quote. And I think it very much is 100% in spirit with the way in which I do my very best to live my life, and certainly in spirit with the books that I write.
Unfortunately, our time is running out, John. Thank you so much having you here in this podcast. Looking forward, hopefully, to see you the next time in person somewhere on that lovely planet. Stay healthy, and I'm already looking forward to your new book.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me on the podcast, and congratulations and best of luck as you continue to go forward. Stay well.
Thank you, John. Bye.
Bye now.